Life Hacks Show. Life Hacks gives you proof hacks and tips for the best version of yourself. And here's your crash test dummy for a better life, Marcus Meurer.
Alright guys, welcome to a new episode of the Life Hacks Show, live from Brazil, and we are here in Casa de Gwen, which is a very nice place where also the next camp happened, and I'm here with one of the participants, but this is already 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, I can't remember our camp, but I'm happy that you're on the show. Hey Samantha.
Hi Marcus, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for your time, and thanks that we finally made it to catch up to tape our podcast. It's always the same. In the beginning of every camp, I think, there are so many interesting people. I will ping some people and then tape the podcast. But time flies by. And finally, now we made it.
We've been trying for weeks, and now we have made it happen.
Yeah.
Which is very exciting.
Totally exciting also for me. So maybe tell the audience, where are you from, what is your origin, and what brought you to Brazil and to join our DNX camp in this small hippie place, Jericoacoara.
For kite surfers, right?
Yeah, for kite surfers.
So I'm from the US originally, and I have been nomading for about 3 years now, and I've been in a bunch of countries and a bunch of continents and done lots of traveling. And I actually have been doing the digital nomad thing for a couple of years now, and my favorite activity is actually connecting with other people that I share something really deeply ingrained with. Mm-hmm. So whether that's the language learning for me, or whether that's eating healthy for me, talking with vegans and raw people, or whether or whether it's the entrepreneurialism. Like, I really seek community everywhere I go. Since it's so difficult because I'm nomadic, I change locations so often, so I really have to seek out community. And so the DNX camp was perfect for me because I already knew I wanted to be somewhere and connect with an environment, connect with some people, and connect with a group that I hadn't been a part of before. Uh-huh. And I had known about DNX, and I'd been excited about DNX, but had never been anything DNX related.
Where did you get to know the whole movement?
I was actually sitting in a co-working cafe with a friend of mine, and she really wanted to go to one of the DNX camps in Egypt, actually, this year, a couple of months ago. And she asked for my help and for something about the conference. And I gave her my help, and I said, this is really cool. Like, I'd heard the name DNX before, but I'd never really connected with it. But this time I really saw it and went, wow, that's really cool. But it's only for German speakers. Oh!
The Egypt camp, you mean?
The Egypt camp, yeah.
It was our first German-speaking camp because many people were asking again. We always refused and said, at least you need to speak English to go into the world and travel the world. But people loved it when we did it now, the German-speaking camp, because they don't feel too comfortable to speak English with other people. But I think they underestimate themselves. That happened to me before. When I took my first international job, I also took some business English classes till I hopped on my first Skype call within the company with some Italians, French people, all working there as international online marketing managers like me. And then I said, okay, maybe my English is not too bad, but I was really shy too.
Yeah, I mean, I helped her talk herself into going to the camp, and I actually told her that if she went to the camp, I would go with her. Yeah. And I would study German really hard for a couple more months, and I was going to get good enough to go, but she actually ended up ditching out. But the seed was set for me, was planted. And so when I was looking for a place to go for November, December, DNX came up again, and I said, I can make this happen. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to Brazil.
Yeah. I remember when you approached us and wrote us in to ensure that it can really work, because you're reliable on very stable internet, making your calls and everything. And then we were trying hard to make everything.
Yeah, because I do sales. I have to make a lot of phone calls, and I have to have really solid internet, which really, it limits me sometimes for locations. Yeah. But it's also just something that I love what I do. So I do whatever I can to make it possible.
Yeah, and this is really one of the most remote places we are doing a camp. So you have to imagine it's like directly within a national park, and around us, around this village, is nothing from infrastructure. But therefore they already set up lots of infrastructure if you compare it to other mini tiny fisher villages. Especially for the camp, I think we made it happen that we have good internet most of the time.
It was quite doable. Yeah. And especially when I was getting here on that 45-minute drive over the sand dunes in the buggy, I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? What have I done? I'm so screwed.
Where will I go? Where will I end up? Huh?
No ATMs, no cars.
No ATMs, yeah. Just donkeys and some wild animals invading the village at night.
But I've been here for over a month now, so obviously I like it and I'm happy.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you know what? Now they just started, I think today or yesterday, we didn't have any electricity today for 1 hour because they started to build up new optical lines for the internet for next year.
Fiber optic. Oh,
we have
nice.
fiber optic within the streets in Jericoacoara. I couldn't believe, but when they really made this happen, the company is called Cyber Info, I think. Then it's finally really a digital nomad hotspot and getaway, and I don't think it will be.
We don't even have roads, but we're going to have fiber.
Yeah.
That's great for when I come back next year.
Yeah, totally. Okay, and so then you checked in and went to this crazy place. And did you have any expectations when you started to join the DNX camp? Did you make any plans, or was your plan just be in the flow and see what happens?
I really didn't. Because I've been to a number of camps like this for digital nomads and for other kinds of groups. Mm-hmm. I'm well aware that for me, by far the most important part of the camp is the people, and not usually along the ways where I might think like, oh, I want to meet somebody who does X, or I need help with Y. Like, It's not really a logical, rational thing. It's much more just I'm a very, how do I want to say this? Like, I work hard. I enjoy working and I work very hard, but it's hard for me to pull myself out of my routine. Mm-hmm. Like when I get into a routine, I keep working, I do my thing, and I don't connect with people.
Okay.
And so
once you're in the zone,
it's just, and I'll stay there for weeks and I won't talk to anybody. And it's okay for short periods of time, but it's not healthy for long periods of time. So when I put myself in this camp, I tell everybody I'm working with, like, hey, I'm going to be mostly offline for 10 days. I'm going to be doing this thing. Mm-hmm. I'm able to give permission to myself to let go of some of the things that I always want to have, like I have to this, I have to that, I have to this other thing. Mm. I let go of that during the camp so that I can really...
Was it easy for you?
Not at first. It never is.
Yeah.
Usually for about 2 or 3 days, I really struggle with it. Mm-hmm. And then I really get into the flow of it. And then usually the last day or two is also like, oh my God, I'm going to have to do my thing. Mm-hmm. But the part in the middle where I'm able to let go of stuff is, I think during this camp, there was about 5 or 6 days where I was really just disconnected and not trying so hard, where that's really positive for me because I connect with the people around me. I enjoy the nature. I enjoy the things that are around. And I just am able to live within a different lifestyle and really connect with people on that deep level. Which is it's soul satisfying to get those kinds of connections with people.
Totally.
Yeah, I went to a polyglot conference a couple of weeks before I came here to Jericoacoara, and it was the same thing. I was there for a week. I really connected with people. I was able to do it. And then I took 3 weeks to work in Fortaleza, in the bigger town close to here, and then I came here.
You worked in a co-working space?
I did.
In the Elephant co-working?
In the Elephant co-working, yes.
Yeah, from Igor.
Yes, from Igor. It was great.
Nice. He was here last year on the camp and gave a talk and joined us for some days with his wife.
I got to spend time with him. I got to spend time with his wife. They were both really lovely. Yeah. And so I worked there for 3 weeks and then got myself all set up and came to Jericoacoara to just...
Yeah, cool. Obviously it worked. And what kind of people did you connect to? Can you give some examples in terms of how are you still connected to them, or what kind of people like?
One of the people in the camp in particular I connected with really deeply, and That would be Michelle.
Yeah.
And she went back to Berlin, I think, within a day or two after the camp was finished. And she and I have been in contact since then. And I actually, I was just telling you before we started this that I talked her into, I talked everyone into it. I do sales for a living. I talked her into, I talked her into joining my mastermind. It's a high level mastermind of people who've already gotten to a certain level of success, I guess.
How often do you check in?
It's once a week.
Okay.
It's actually pretty frequent mastermind, and we actually had our mastermind meeting today. So we have Michelle from Germany, we have myself from the U.S. living in Brazil, we have an American who's living in Bulgaria, and we have a German who's living in Bali. And so everybody has their businesses, and it's a...
And Michelle is also constantly moving.
Yes,
so she's just now in Germany. Yeah.
She's in Berlin now, but she's probably only there 4 or 5 months a year. So it's really good to have. And everybody's pretty much at my level. Like, it's really like they've launched their businesses. They've been remote for a while. Like, everybody in that group has been remote for at least 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of the struggles. We've seen a lot of what works. And we just support each other in how to just try new stuff. Because we've all screwed up enough to where it's not like brand new anymore. It's more like, hey, I'm trying this new thing, and of course I already did but what should I do next?
Yeah.
So we've kind of gotten through those first like steps that you have to go through no matter what. And now it's like, okay, I've got the basics down, but I want to try something new. Because 2 of the people out of those 4, actually no, 3 of us are starting something completely new in the next couple of months.
Oh, interesting.
And have all had successful businesses, online businesses in the past. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's an exciting stage. It's a very, very sensitive stage, I think, because it scares many people to leave your old business, which funds you more or less, and then start something new. But the inner calling is stronger to start something new as an entrepreneur than just stick to your old stuff.
It's terrifying.
It's totally terrifying.
It's just like soul. It is. It's just like really deep level of insecurity, fear feeling for a lot of people.
And I think especially the surroundings of these people and the people they connect to, many people would say, you're crazy, why are you doing it? You can live on your own terms, you can travel the world, you're funded. Why do you start something completely new?
Yeah.
So I think you can only feel how these people feel if you have been there before. And for this, it's very important to have people on your same level in this mastermind group. But
it's also very important to something that I've noticed, that people frequently make that comment to me like, oh my gosh, aren't you scared? Aren't you terrified of doing all these things? And I actually never have been. I kind of stopped there because I'm like, is that true? Is that true? Yes, it's actually true. Like ever since I started my nomadic journey, it's never been a fear thing for me.
Never ever. Where did the self-esteem come from? And
well, the power is really from my own life experiences that I've had, where I've had several experiences in my life where I've lost everything, and I'm making the quotes with my fingers because whether it was financial or relational or physical things, like I've had several periods, 2 different major periods in my life where I lost what I, at the time, what most people would consider just everything, and I had nothing left. And I had to start over completely from scratch. In one case in a completely different country, and in another case in a city where I'd never been before, with no money, no family and friends. I just like really lost the things that were important to me. And so when it came to being a digital nomad, I was like, all right, so I don't really have a job. I don't really have a place to go. I don't really know how I'm going to make my life. But you know what? I've kind of been through worse. And this fear of this situation, like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to find enough money to do my thing or to buy a new computer or clothing or whatever. Like it just never really hit me to that deep level of fear, like losing relationships or losing family or losing like my status. In one of those situations, I also lost like my status in society. And it's like, I kind of felt like, because I'd already been through some really hard experiences, like, well, if I screw up, like, I'm okay.
You're still okay.
I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. I think this is also, because you stretch your comfort zone already a lot in all different terms that you are just thinking, come on, just give it to me and I will somehow fight through it, even if it's something totally new, like the nomadic lifestyle. And did you have any plan when you started into this nomadic lifestyle? And
zero.
what were your first resources? Because I listened to your workshop and your talk on our camp, and I was really fascinated by how structured you tackled this new phase of your life.
So part of the reason another reason that I felt so comfortable is I always had a really strong plan B.
Yeah.
So my plan B was I was licensed, certified, and educated as a nurse practitioner in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And I can make around 50 euros an hour doing that at any time. I could show up and I could have a job and I could do what I'm...
You're paid by hour in this job?
Now I am, because I'm not paid at all right now because I'm not there. Mm-hmm. But if I show up and work just a couple hours a week, they can pay me by the hour.
Okay.
And it's certainly enough to live off of.
Okay. And you can always go back because the demand is still high.
Extremely. Because I speak Spanish and English, the demand in the city where I was, it was in Tucson, an hour from the border with Mexico. The demand is intense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This gives you like a good big security.
It's a huge security net. And I did, so the reason...
The worst that can happen, you go back and
right.
earn good money as a nurse.
Right, and I did that once.
Yeah.
Like I did that several times. Like I failed at my nomadic journey and I went and did that and it was okay. But I forgot what the question you actually asked was.
How you tackled the new phase of your life and how
so the reason I started this new phase in my life was because I was so burned out as a nurse practitioner.
Okay. How much did you work?
About 80 or 100 hours a week.
Okay.
For 5 years.
It was about the workload.
Yeah. I mean, it was a 40-hour-a-week full-time job, but as a new nurse practitioner, I'm seeing patients on my own. It's a general practitioner job in the U.S., except I had no support. Mm-hmm. I was supposed to have support, but the two doctors who were supposed to support me were both total jerks, and I couldn't ask them for help. I just had to figure everything out on my own. And the first 2 years were 100-hour weeks just because I was trying to figure everything out and like going home and like studying for 3 hours to try and figure out what I would do for that same patient the next day. Like, oh crap, what am I going to do? Like, I'm afraid I'm going to hurt somebody if I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And after 2 years, I knew what I was doing better. Like I was comfortable with it. But at that point, I got promoted to have my own clinic. So then I had a whole new set of responsibilities and it was either like, I was the only one at the clinic. It was a one-provider clinic. So either I saw the patients or they didn't get seen, which was really stressful for me because it was so like... I was seeing between 20 and 25 patients a day, which is quite normal for them. But if I took a sick day because I was terribly, horribly ill, I knew in my head and in reality that 2 people would end up in the hospital that I could have seen and taken care of, even if I were ill. And so the pressure that I put on myself, that my patients put on me, that my staff put on me was like, oh, you have to be here even if you're dying because we don't want these people to have to go to the hospital. And so that was actually the breaking point that I reached on that after 5 years of doing that was I took several longer vacations to try and get myself burnt out because I knew I was burning out. I was losing my compassion. That's really when I knew was when I stopped caring about patients. I was like, this is not okay. I can't live this way.
It's a red flag.
That's just a red flag waving right in front of my face. Like,
change something.
This has to change immediately because that's a core part of my personality that I'm very compassionate and caring. And I'm a nurse. Like, this is what we do.
Yeah, totally.
But I got really frustrated with being so burnt out, took a couple of long vacations, and the person who covered for me both times was a total jerk to my staff, was a total jerk to my patients, and refused to do my work. So between these two times where I took a grand total of 3 weeks of vacation, I came back after a week and a half each time to 2 people who had cancer who hadn't been told. At least one person who died because of this, because the person who was covering for me refused to call them. He just didn't want to do the work. It was too much work. 3 broken bones that people didn't know about, one or two of which had to be sent to the hospital so they could have their bone broken again so that they could heal it correctly. And
Too bad.
and a couple of other things where I was just coming back and I was furious the moment I got back, and I was like, I can't live this way anymore. So I saved up some money and I just took off.
When was this?
This was in 2013, so about 3 years ago. And I just saved up some money and I took off to go to Japan for 6 months to study Japanese. I had no plans after that. I just said, I signed up for a language school.
But you had the money to fund yourself for half a year in Japan, and that's it. And then you would be on more or less zero after this.
Correct.
And hopefully with a study or diploma in Japanese.
Yeah, that was basically it.
So all in.
But then after about 3 or 4 months, because when I first got there, I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But then once the chaos came down a little bit and calmed down, and I stopped being just my brain cleared out after a couple of months. I was like, 6 months is not going to be enough. I don't want to go back to the same job. And I kind of knew that coming out of the gate, but I just needed to escape, and nothing else mattered. I didn't have any plans past that.
And then things became very clear once having also physical distance.
Yeah, because creating the physical distance is also very difficult with that job, because people depend on me very heavily.
Yeah.
And they're human beings, right? Like they really, really need me, and nobody else can help me the way that you do. Please, doctor, please don't leave me. And because of my job, I have to give 3 months notice as a nurse practitioner. So everybody knew I was leaving for 3 months before I was actually gone, which is just like, it's crazy, because nobody's happy when you're leaving a job and you know you're leaving, but you can't actually leave yet. But it's a thing in the US because of insurance companies and a bunch of stupid stuff. But everyone knew I was leaving, but I didn't actually leave until 3 months later.
So also the patients, everybody has to know.
The patients have to know too, because they can't schedule more visits with me.
Okay.
And because there's no Spanish-speaking providers in the entire town, they couldn't get anyone to fill my job. So they couldn't actually make any appointments at all after my go date. And so then once people start like, oh, no, you can't make an appointment. Well, what about the week after? Well, no, you can't make one you can't make one ever. Like, well, what do you mean I can't make one ever? Like, yeah, it's very complicated with changes of doctors and nurse practitioners in the US. It's very complicated. And particularly Spanish speakers, because we're so rare.
Yeah.
They didn't know what they were going to do until a week after I left. That's when they figured it out. It's just the way it worked. So when I was gone for 2 or 3 months, it became clear to me, like you started to say, like I'm not ready to go back, not even part-time, because I've gotten away from these expectations and from this pressure cooker situation, and I want to stay away for longer, but how am I going to fund that? How am I going to do that? Like, what? And I just dove into everything. I dove into, how can I make a living online? How can I be a doctor online? How can I see patients on the phone? How can I make my own business? I found the Tropical MBA podcast. I listened to the first 250 episodes.
From Dan and Ian, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Dan and Ian. I binge listened to those for like a month straight. I listened to probably 80% of the first entire 250 episodes, all of them that were out at that point. I think there's like 500 now.
Like really, really valuable content. Right?
Super
Golden
valuable.
Nuggets.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because normally when I learn a new skill or a new area, I will just dive into it until I feel like I've reached saturation.
Yeah.
And I'm a fast learner, and I really enjoy learning. I'm a voracious reader and a voracious learner, so I tend to learn things really quickly. But when it came to this whole like digital nomad lifestyle and life hacking and doing all these things, it was like there's so much here that I'm fascinated in. So I kept finding more rabbit holes to go down to be like, oh, I want to learn about travel hacking, and oh, I want to learn about language hacking, and oh, I want to learn about working online as a nurse practitioner, or how about teaching online, or how about doing this other thing, or how about joining an entrepreneur and working for them, or an internship, or God, I don't know what any of this stuff is. And every time I would pick up a new episode, I'd be like, okay, this is another thing that I want to jump down the rabbit hole of. And I just would. Because I had the time, I had the funds, and I knew that before, my personality is such that I want to have a hold on what something means to me before I take action. I don't have to know what the action looks like. I don't have to know what I'm going to do. I don't have to have a plan. But I have to feel like I understand what my relationship with this new thing is before I feel good taking action. So
how to tackle it properly, from which direction.
Exactly. So I did that for probably 2 or 3 months, and I didn't figure out anything about how to make money until after I left Okinawa.
And how did that feel once you dove into this new topic and then see, wow, I can do this and this and this and also that, and what about language hacking, travel hacking, earning money online on the road, and all these different topics, which for most people like is a whole new world, and
a whole new world, a whole new world.
So many different layers of freedom. I was just overwhelmed when I stepped into this without any plan or purpose, and then I was just flashed and had this inner calling. I will make it happen, whatever will come.
That's right. You started it the same way.
No, we didn't step into it on purpose. It was just that we quit our jobs. We went on a half-year travel to Southeast Asia, and I took my laptop just to start my business, which was meant to be located in Berlin as an online marketing agency. But it worked out that I could already take the first clients while traveling, and they gave me the trust, even though the concept was... Nobody knew about the concept. No. It was 2012. There were no tropical co-working spaces. It's unbelievable now, but there was no Ubuntu and nothing. And the people were asking, what are you doing? It's not possible. We can't do it like this. And then after lots of explaining and Skype calls, they gave me some trust, and I delivered. And at the end, they paid the bills while we were still traveling in Indonesia or Bali. And this was like the never go back point for us.
Yeah, so I actually left Okinawa the 6 months in Japan, and I came back to the States because I ran out of money, right? And I started working as a nurse practitioner again at the clinic, because the person who'd taken over my clinic was pregnant when she took the job. So 6 months later, she had her baby.
Very smart.
And yeah, right. So I came and worked in the clinic, but only very part-time, like 12 hours a week or 15 hours a week or something. And I started 2 location-independent jobs at the same time. So I had nothing for 6 months. And then I went back to the clinic, started my first teaching gig, and started my first entrepreneurial gig all at the same time. So I had essentially 3...
So you were working as a freelancer, teaching, and starting your own online business, and working as an employee?
Actually, there's 4, because I didn't even mention my own thing at that point. I was teaching for a university, which I still do occasionally, for an online university for nurse practitioner students.
Ah, nice.
And I got a job with he himself is a independent entrepreneur, working with researchers, medical researchers in Australia. And so I worked for him doing sales calls and talking to a bunch of researchers, because I wasn't intimidated by them. And I could speak medicalese and I can speak academic ease. And I was comfortable learning about sales and just went for it. And that job was location independent. And my clients were all in Australia. So then I took off to go to Southeast Asia for a couple of years, basically. Because that's where my job was anyway.
And where have you been in Southeast Asia?
I spent a lot of time in Taiwan. I spent almost a year in Taiwan. I really liked it there. I've traveled a lot around Thailand. I lived there intermittently, but never really for a long period of time. And I've visited a bunch of other places, like Bali and Philippines. And
have you been to hotspots like Chiang Mai or Bali?
I lived in Chiang Mai for a while. I lived in Bali for a while. But both of those were like a month or 2. It wasn't like longer term like I did in Taiwan.
Okay, it wasn't clicking too much with you that you said, okay, finally I have my community around me? It was enough for you to have a good online community?
I don't know if I'd say it was enough to have a good online community, but it's true that they never quite clicked with me. Chiang Mai, the way I do things is I almost always go to a place for 4 or 5 days for some other reason and then leave. And it's in the back of my mind, like, I really liked that place. Like, I'd like to go back there and check it out. And then I'll go back for a month or two to see if I really click with it. So I've gotten to that level with a bunch of places, but the only one I got to the next level was Taiwan. However, I would absolutely be willing to live in Chiang Mai longer term because I really liked it. But I always just went back to Taiwan instead. Because I had an apartment with roommates and friends. And
where was it?
Tainan.
Tainan.
It's 2 hours south on the bullet train from Taipei.
All right. And why especially this place in Taiwan? How did you get there?
So I was really excited about Taipei because I had a 30-hour layover there once. And I just really liked it.
Yeah, I also heard a lot of good stories about Taipei.
The vibe there was just like, oh, it's so good. So I left, and like a year later, I came back, and I went to Taipei, and I was like, yeah, I'm here, I'm in Taiwan, I want to learn Chinese, I'm going to da-da-da-da-da-da, and I hated it. But the reason I hated it was because it was cold and rainy. And I recognized that. Like, it was a weather thing. It wasn't Taipei's fault.
Season.
Yeah, it just wasn't for me at that point. So I said, well, I don't want to leave Taiwan. What am I going to do? And I looked on a map and said, okay, Taipei actually means Thai, the same Thai from Taiwan. And Bei means north. Beijing is the same. Beijing, China means north capital. So Taipei means Taiwan north. So I was like, well, what about the southern part of Taiwan? Would that be any better? I mean, it's not that big of an island. But it turns out that there's like a couple of mountain ranges in between. And so the climate is 7 or 8 degrees warmer.
Really?
And there's 30 or 40% less rain.
Wow.
And so I went from 5 degrees and raining every day to 15 degrees and raining every 3 or 4 days. And I was so happy.
I can tell.
And actually, the reason it clicked so much was because of community. So I went to the high-speed rail station, the bullet train station in Taipei with all my stuff, and I couldn't figure out how to get the stupid ticket in the machine. I felt like such an idiot. And I couldn't speak any Chinese when I got there. I knew ni hao and xie xie, hello and thank you. That's it. So I'm fighting with this machine. The train's leaving in like 3 minutes. I don't want to miss it. And I'm like, and this little Taiwanese girl bops up from the other side and says, do you want me to help you? In perfect English. And I'm like, yes, I do. She turned my ticket over and put it in the right way. I was just, whatever.
Wow.
And we talked the entire way to Tainan. I dropped my stuff off. She took me out to lunch with her best friend that day.
Oh, how nice.
Whose wedding I was just at in Munich a month ago. And so was this person. Actually, she came from Taiwan to Munich for the wedding. And then to another lunch with a couple of other friends, and then to the most popular expat bar, which is about half Taiwanese and half expats. And I'm still in touch with probably 10 people that I met that day.
Wow.
And I lived with 2 of them for a year. And I formed a lot of
Just after meeting in the first night.
Just one night, yeah. I mean, I didn't live with them until maybe 6 months later.
Yeah.
But like, I met a whole bunch of people and forged some really strong bonds. And it was also just like, it blew me away because this American girl from North America comes to Taiwan and meets this Taiwanese girl. She takes me to lunch with her Russian best friend. We then go to a second lunch with her Kenyan and her British other closest friends. And there's 5 people from 5 continents that just met and we're all really clicking. And I just felt so comfortable and loved and content to be there. I mean, Tainan definitely feels like I have a very strong home feeling there.
Still.
And I do. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't, fantasize is a little bit strong. Dream is a little bit strong, but my current location is chosen largely because I work for a German company with clients in the US. So I need to be in those time zones somewhere. Like I really just can't live in Asia right now because it would suck for everyone. And everyone would hate it, myself included. But if I didn't have that, I would definitely have been back there more recently.
How long have you been living there?
In Taiwan?
Yeah.
About a year.
About a year.
1 year. It was off and on though. Like I came back to the States, I went to Taiwan, I went to Thailand, I went back to Taiwan. Like I had a home base there for a little bit over a year.
Nice.
And that was really comforting because it's also dirt cheap. So cheap.
It is.
I had
compared to Thailand, is the same level of cost for living?
Tainan is about 20% cheaper than Taipei because it's quite provincial. Tainan is significantly smaller. There's not a good transportation infrastructure like there is in Taipei. But the food is much cheaper, the rent is much cheaper. I mean, we had a 3-bedroom apartment for 3 people, and it was...
No, they work next door, right?
Yeah. I think that's actually a 4x4 or something.
Oh, yeah, maybe he just wants to show off.
He does, yeah, and it's working. But it was 300 euros a month.
Wow.
Total.
For
we
3...
each paid 100 euros a month.
A month.
Yeah, so even when I wasn't there, it was like, oh, well, it's 100 euros to have a place to go back to.
Yeah.
I had a gym down the street. I had my favorite restaurants. I had friends that I lived with that I loved. My friend was also vegetarian, and my 2 roommates were dating. They weren't supposed to be. They weren't when we moved in. Yeah, they weren't when we were going to move in. But by the time we moved in, I was
at the end, you had one more spare room.
Yeah, then we had one more spare room. So she was a really good cook, and he was vegetarian, and it was Asian food. So I was automatically.
They were both from Taiwan?
She was Vietnamese, and he was British. The British guy I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I met them both on my first night in Taiwan. So she was a very accomplished cook, and he was vegetarian, and almost all vegetarian food in Asia, really, but in Taiwan specifically, is vegan.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but it's extremely easy to be vegan in Taiwan. Super easy.
Yeah.
45% of the entire Taiwanese population is Taoist as a religion, and Taoists are vegan. Not entirely. They still eat eggs, and they don't eat garlic or onions, which is a little difficult for me.
Yeah.
But so a lot of restaurants, if you look for a certain symbol that means vegetarian, it's actually everything is vegan except for the eggs on the end.
Yeah.
There's no cheese, there's no cream, there's no anything. So I was in gastronomic heaven because they have all these like restaurants where you can just go and pick up what you want by weight or whatever, and you know that it's all vegetarian and it's almost all vegan.
So convenient,
and I can walk there, right down the street.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe wait for some seconds. Right, now everybody is aware that they left the place. Cool. Yeah, very exciting to hear more about Taiwan. Once we had a speaker on our DNX conference. He still is living in Taipei, and he's a very, very huge, big, and famous tech blogger. And he went there on purpose because they got all the new stuff way earlier than even the States or other countries, and they're so forward thinking there, and so much first movers and everything what is about tech, and it looked like Disneyland for tech addicted people when he showed the slides and what's going on there, and
so true.
How they're pampered from the big tech companies.
Yeah, it's all true. I mean, I have to say, having lived there, although as a nomad, I mean, I'm a language learner, so I purposefully took myself out of Taipei, partly because I wanted to learn the language. Yeah. But anybody who's going there for anything but that, I would recommend to stay in Taipei because it's a great international city. But it's absolutely true. We paid 20 euros a month for our internet, and it was 80 megabits per second.
Yeah.
80.
Things like this. Or there are even companies no one knows about that, and they build way better stuff than Apple or all these other companies, and they cost just half the amount of the money and have 3 times more features. And it was like he got some devices with him, Sascha Pallenberg, and was really, really impressive what's going on there in Taipei, and no one knows about it, more or less.
It's, when I didn't really realize how to the extent to which that was true until I was really, even until I was there for a couple of months, because suddenly I needed some kind of tech thing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to go back to the U.S. And people were like, what are you stupid? Like, you're in Taiwan. 80% of semiconductors in the entire world are manufactured in this country, in this tiny little country of 23 million people or something. And all you have to do is go to Beimanlu, which is North Gate Street. And it's this street that has like, it's just got tech store after tech store after tech store after tech store after. It's just like
heaven.
Blows your mind. Like, oh my gosh. That's actually, so my laptop was actually bought on Beimanlu because I was in Taiwan and I knew I needed a new laptop. And I was like, I'm going to get it here because it's easier and it's cheaper. But yeah, half of my friends, because Taiwan is so friendly to foreigners, most of my friends there were actually students at the university, and they were studying for free because Taiwan wants foreign talent and wants foreign students. They really do a lot to attract people. And I would say 80% of my friends were studying for free at the university and getting a stipend.
Nice.
And most of the English language programs were either linguistically related, business related, or engineering related. So I have a friend who's a chemical engineer. I have another friend who is a lithium battery engineer. I still don't understand what he does, but he's very excited about it.
I think it's a very, very important part of every electronic device. And working on this can change a lot.
Creating the new type of non-lithium, I don't even know enough to talk about it, but they're like the cutting edge of here's the next kind of thing that we can do to improve how the batteries work. And there's just, it was really fascinating to be there and see all of those things happening around me. It was really cool.
Was there ever a situation in your life where you already felt really happy that you're location independent and can work from anywhere and just go on with your work despite where you are at the moment?
Many, many times. The one that comes to mind most is one that I think I talked about at the DNX camp was I was in Taiwan at the time, actually. I was in Taiwan and my sister threw her back out. She'd had back surgery in the past. She'd had a back injury when she had her first baby, and her back never quite got better. So she had her second kiddo, and she had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at home, and something happened to where she actually shattered 3 of her discs in a row, and she was bedridden for weeks and needed surgery, but the doctors didn't want to give it to her. They just wanted her to just like chill out at home and not do any heavy lifting, and she had a 1-year-old. It's
not possible. It doesn't go.
And her husband was not the kind of guy who's going to take care of the kids, and nobody was stepping up. And I was like, well, I'm nomadic digitally because I want to be able to do whatever I do from anywhere that I am. And where I really need to be right now is in Stevens Point, Wisconsin with my sister. And so I called up my boss. I was working for the entrepreneur at the time, the Australian entrepreneur, and said, hey, I'm going to keep working, doing whatever I can, but I'm out. You know, I'm going to be offline for 2 days while I get there, and then I'll be back, but I'm probably going to be kind of worthless. But I already had a year of experience at that point, so I knew how to maintain things. I wasn't going to start any big new projects or anything, but I could maintain my work and keep doing what I was already doing well. And he was completely and utterly supportive. And he actually said, one of the reasons I designed this business the way that I did was so that I could do exactly what you're doing right now. Because that's important to me. So go take care of your sister. And I said, ha. So I went back to the States. I stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks. Went to the hospital, took care of my sister's kids while I was there. And after a couple of weeks, I flew back to Thailand to Thailand instead of Taiwan to go to one of Cody McKibben's retreats, actually. I went to one of Cody McKibben's
Thrilling
retreats.
Heroics, I think it's his brand, right?
The Digital Nomad Academy and Thrilling Heroics are both his brand. I think this one was DNA. They're kind of intermixed in my head. But I went back to Asia to go to one of his things, and the fact that, that I could just pick up, and I mean, I was on a plane within 24 hours of finding out what was happening. And I was home after a 15-hour flight within 48 hours of finding out. And that was a defining moment for me when I realized, like, I am being where I am meant to be in this world and doing what I'm meant to do in this world. Yeah. And that just feels it just feels so nourishing. It just feels like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing something nobody else can do right now because I have built this location-independent lifestyle. I can be where I need to be. And that was really cool. I did the same thing. I actually did the same thing a year later. I'm not able to share the circumstances because he wouldn't be comfortable with me doing it, but my other sibling, my brother, had a really scary situation that he also needed some help with. Yeah. And I was actually coming through Los Angeles to go back to Tucson a year after with my sister, about a year past from now, in March of 2015. I had a layover in Los Angeles, and I called him up 2 days before and said, hey, I'm stopping over in LA. I didn't think I was going to have a layover, but it turns out I'll have 24 hours there. Do you want to come and hang out? And he said, so I got off the plane in Los Angeles and didn't get back on.
That's the advantage when you just have one-way tickets.
I'd never done that before, and I was like, oh, I don't have to take my flight to Tucson. Like, no. I'm just going to stay. This is where I need to be right now. Uh-huh. So I stayed in LA for about a week with him and helped him work through the stuff that was happening. Yeah. And it was a really solid, good feeling. And it was like, that one, I didn't even plan it myself. I was just like, I just showed up and he was like in this situation. And I was like, I can help with this. Mm-hmm. There's no reason. I was going to Costa Rica, but I was going to be in Tucson for a week, and then I was going to be in Costa Rica for a couple of months, but there was no urgency to any of it. No. And I was like, you know what? This is where I need to be. Mm-hmm. And I just stopped and said, okay, I'm here with you. It's
so good to hear, and so good that you share this story, because I think some people still have this picture of digital nomads being very egocentric and saying my freedom, my life, my self-determination. But it's also about, especially in the nomad community, I see so many selfless people and caring people and just using their freedom to help other people to be there when they need to be somewhere, and they can do it. And it's just great to see this ultimate freedom of different levels, how this can be used.
There's a part to it. I mean, the process is absolutely self-centered, but it's not selfish. Mm-hmm. Because the only reason I can do that is because I did create that level of freedom for myself. Yeah. And
first you have to care about yourself and your own happiness and your own
to be able to offer that.
Yeah, and to be able to help others. Yeah.
And that requires a lot of sacrifices from me and from family. Like I'm not home for Christmas very often, which is very important to my family, and I'm not able to see my niece and my nephew as often as I'd like, and blah blah blah.
But this year you're gonna make it.
I am. I'm going in 3-4 days. Yeah. But that is something that I was willing to sacrifice and say, okay, this is what I want, because I'm building something where what's really important to me is to be able to be there and be fully present. Because in the past, I'd go home for Christmas, but I was really distracted because I was so stressed out and I hated my life and I was depressed or I was anxious or whatever. And this time it's like, okay, I can go home and fully be present with you. Because I can be present with you, and then when the little ones go to bed, I can go do my work. Yeah. Like it's really, I feel very blessed, and I've set my priorities for this is what's important to me. When shit hits the fan, I can be there. Yeah. And if everything is okay, then we can connect in the way that we're normally connecting. But when bad stuff happens, I can be there in a way that nobody else can. Yeah. Because there were certainly adults that could have helped my sister or my brother in those situations, but they chose not to because they had different priorities and they had lives.
And probably they were also stressed by their own circumstances, jobs, employers, family, whatever.
Yeah. And so I wanted to create a life for myself where I could make those priorities, where I decide this is the most important thing for me right now. Done. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't have to quit a job. I don't have to
Yeah.
I don't
this
know.
is also for me one of the biggest benefits of the whole lifestyle, just to be able to decide on your own terms where to be, when to be there, with whom to work, with whom to communicate, on which to work, the ultimate freedom, just combined with which brings you as an entrepreneur, then which sums up as a location independent entrepreneur and building up your own network. And I think I'm now way more valuable for my family, for my mom, for my brother than having had this job in a startup in Berlin where I still would have been an employee, and if something would have happened, I could go to Düsseldorf and have them. At the end, you're still struggling with your job and somewhere else. But now I know when something is happening or they need me, I can go there. I can stay for months, for years. I can just go on with my work, no matter where I am at the moment.
Digital nomadism feels like you're losing all of your security. And my God, it does feel that way sometimes. Mm-hmm. But it's, what am I trying to say? Like what you and I are talking about is really the opposite feeling. Like when you really understand what it is that you're good for and why you are where you are. Like for me, the ultimate moment came after about two years when that thing with my sister happened, where I was like, okay, after that happened and I came back to Southeast Asia and I started doing my thing again, I started to become really more conscious about, okay, so I've been in 20 some countries in the past 3 years on 5 continents. Oh. And if you could be anywhere in the world right now, why are you here? Mm-hmm. Really, why are you here? And for me, since that experience with my sister and with my brother, and now having some stability and having created this lifestyle for myself, I can always answer that because I know why I am where I am, because I really can choose it. Like if I didn't want to be in Brazil right now, I wouldn't be here. Genuinely, I wouldn't be here because I don't have to be. Mm-hmm. But I'm here because I choose to be mindfully, consciously present in where I am, and that's how I choose where I'm going, is what speaks to my soul, what speaks to my heart about what's my most important priority right now, and where do I need to be to make that feeling come true or happen or be realized.
Yeah, this is also why I think many or most of the DJ nomads are very conscious and very aware of their why, especially where they are in this moment. So they are way more reflecting their environment than probably other people who are just forced to be somewhere at a certain place at a certain time.
Even on vacation. That's absolutely true, because when I would take vacations as a nurse practitioner, I just needed to get the heck out of there.
Yeah.
All I wanted was to escape. I didn't want to be where I was going. I didn't have I remember going to this conference that it was this alternative medicine conference. I was there for 2 weeks in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. I was so excited. It was this big, long thing. And I got there and I was like, I'm still stressed about work. I'm not enjoying the conference, even though it's exactly what I wanted it to be. Like it's meeting my expectations, but I'm not meeting my expectations because I'm still too wound up. And I realized I couldn't be fully present in my moment, even when I wasn't at work. And that was also part of the trigger for me quitting. That was my last vacation before I quit, because I realized I couldn't be fully present in my own body, mind, and soul when I was resting. And I said, that's not. And so when I became a traveler and an entrepreneur, you really have to think about that stuff all the time because of those situations. Like, okay, if I'm going to be here, if I'm going to go home and help my family, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to start this new business, you have to know what you are doing and why you are doing it. Otherwise, you're just lost.
Yeah, totally agree. As you're a big language hacker and a polyglot, you just mentioned it, could you give the listeners 3 hacks how to start to learn a new language out of your experience? And how many languages do you speak now?
I can, and I speak 6 languages at this point. I spoke only English growing up. I speak Spanish and Portuguese fluently. I speak Chinese.
You learned them all when you've been an adult?
Yes.
Okay.
Spanish I started learning as a child.
All right.
I started learning when I was 12.
Yeah. In the school?
In school, yes. But all the other languages were as an adult.
So now it's English, Spanish?
English, Spanish, and Portuguese are all fluent. German and Chinese are intermediate. Like I can hold a conversation, but it's a struggle. I really have to think hard. And French and Japanese, I can hold a basic conversation, but I require a lot of prompting. And I think that's it.
That's it. But Japanese is a big thing, right? It's also about new letters and new alphabet and new.
Japanese was really hard for me. Between Japanese and Chinese, there's always the argument of what's the hardest language in the universe. For me, Japanese is way harder than Chinese, simply because of the way that the language is set up. Japanese has much more complicated grammar, but Chinese has much more complicated pronunciation.
Okay.
But pronunciation is easy for me because I'm a singer, and grammar is hard for me because I don't like sitting down and studying things. So it just turns out that Chinese works better for me.
You can also speak Chinese.
Yes, my Chinese is intermediate. Like I
right,
can
because
actually,
you were just mentioning other language, not Chinese. So
because I lived in Taiwan, yeah.
Yeah.
My Chinese and my German are about the same kind of intermediate level.
Wow, it's quite impressive.
3 hacks to starting a language.
Yes.
The number one most important hack to starting a language is making as many mistakes as possible. The most important thing you can do. Because if you're not making mistakes, you're not actually learning anything. With language learning, you need to be expressing yourself and doing things and talking to another person or learning something and trying things and falling down. If you're not falling down, you can't get up in language learning.
So it's about going out, just trying.
I call it the 100 mistake a day rule.
Start before you're ready.
Absolutely. The second one
and I think no one would be like, every local would be happy that you try to speak his language, and no one would be thinking, well, what a stupid person, he can't speak my language. So everybody's very supportive, right? When you at least try.
Number 2 is get over yourself.
Yeah.
Number 1 is make as many mistakes as possible. Number 2 is get over yourself, because we all have that fear. Like, oh my God, I'm going to look stupid.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he's going to get mad at me for massacring his language. Or I'm going to say something wrong and be embarrassed. And oh my God, I can't do that. And that's so normal. I feel that all the time. And almost no one, I can't say no one, but almost no one will ever say anything negative about you trying to speak their language.
Yeah.
Except maybe the French people. I mean, that's different. They're French. Like, it's okay. I'm learning French right now. So, but 99% of the time, people are just so excited that you even tried.
Yeah.
And they don't care if you do it right. They don't care if you do it well. They just get really excited that you are willing to speak to them in their language.
They're really honored, right?
Oh yeah. And I've learned to say hello and thank you in probably 40 or 50 languages, because I make it a point that anywhere I go, whatever language they speak there, I always learn how to say 2 words. Either hello, thank you, goodbye, something really basic like that. Like,
which is used very often.
Yeah, something that I hear people saying. Or good morning. I learned good morning in Tagalog, mabuhay. Like, just things that I hear all the time. And I ask people what it means so I can say it to them. I don't remember what most of those words are, but people got so excited every time I did it, even though it's like, and I'm like, no, really, that's my only word. Like, I've used everything I got. But it creates a bond with people because they recognize that you care enough about them and their culture and their language to learn something, anything. And that really is beautiful to people. And the third thing is get started. Because so many of us, myself included, over many years, like, oh, I'd really like to learn X, or I'd really like to learn Y. The problem with language learning, one of the most difficult parts about language learning is there's no end goal. Like, it's this really long-term project where you're never done. Like, you can learn English for 30 years professionally and never be done. Like, so what do you mean when you say, I want to speak French? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, because I've learned so many languages, I have a personal goal. Like, I want to be able to have a meaningful conversation with a person who does not speak any other language that I speak in the language that I'm learning. That's what I want. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be grammatical, but I can't have to rely on a dictionary all the time, and I can't have to be constantly searching for words and not have a clue what's going on. So that for me, that's not even fluent.
Yeah.
Like that I would not consider that fluent. Most people would not consider that fluent.
No.
That's kind of an intermediate-ish level. But that for me is what nourishes me. When I get to that level and I can start talking to, I was living in Berlin, and I had studied German for 2 months when I got to Berlin, and I was staying with a German family, a single mom and her 2 kids. The mom spoke quite a bit of English, but the kids didn't speak any. They were 9 and 6, I think. And so the first day I was there, I got a picture of me with one kid on either side. We're sitting on this couch right here, and I'm reading the Eiskönigin. So the Frozen in English. And it's the picture book.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to read this thing in German to these 2 kids, and my brain is trying to default to the English because I know the story, of course.
Yeah.
The entire world knows that story by now. And I'm trying to read this, and I'm saying the names in the English versions, and they're correcting me every time. Like, no, her name is no. And I'm like, I'm sorry, kids. But the fact that I even knew enough German to be able to pull that off, I was just on cloud 9 for days. Like, and I cherished that picture. Like the fact that I got to touch the hearts of those kids and have that level of a connection. My German sucked.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Like, I could connect
Interact
with them.
with them.
I could interact with them and exchange meaningful information. And that's
great.
I mean, that's meaning for me. That's meaning in life.
Cool. Coming to an end, what is the difference in terms of the Portuguese language which they speak in Europe and then in Brazil, and especially here in Ceará, which is the state of Jericoacoara, where we are here now? Are there any huge differences?
Yes. I mean, Brazilian and Portuguese people often don't understand each other when they speak.
Really?
They're using the same words, and it's not even a vocabulary thing. They mostly they have slang, but most of the words are the same, but the pronunciation is so different.
Really?
That, I mean, my Portuguese is all confused. I learned half Portuguese and half Brazilian Portuguese, and so I just get confused everywhere, and I confuse everyone because I switch back and forth between accents. It drives people crazy. But it works for me. But when I was living in Portugal and something Brazilian would come on, like, my Portuguese host family would not know what was happening. They would not be able to follow it. They would want to turn on the subtitles. And the vice versa is true here, where they just don't get it.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot more slang here in Brazil, particularly Ceará, because I've noticed I hear people saying things and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I understand you perfectly, but I have no idea what you're talking about. So I think they have quite a bit more local slang, especially here in Ceará, I don't think it's even around the rest of Brazil, let alone in Portugal.
Yeah, what I've heard is that they use a lot of this very smooth sound at the end, like vachi, rachi, whatsapi, zapi. So it's more like a sing-sang, which sounds really nice to me, not very so hard.
I actually really like it too. It's a very different way of pronouncing the same words. And even Portugal in Portugal, and here's Portugal. Or Brasil.
Brasil.
It's an L. The word has an L on the end, but we say a U here. Brasil. And Brasil. The dente.
The most funny thing for me is like when they ask you have WhatsApp, they say you have Zapi. Zapi is WhatsApp for them because they say WhatsApp.
WhatsApp?
Yeah, and then the short form is you have Zapi.
Yeah, they're very. I really like Brazilian Portuguese because I think you and I talked about this earlier. Like, so I speak Spanish and I learned a little bit of Italian once for a couple of months, and I've sung songs in lots of Italian, and Italian has a lot of really, really sings like La arrivederci, mio caro, io amo, la chiesa è molto bella, and it's very like moving your mouth and moving your arms, and it's a little bit over the top for me. And Spanish is much more reserved, particularly Castilian Spanish, for a Romance language. Whereas Brazilian has the melody of Italian, but it doesn't have quite the over the topness for me.
Yeah.
And much more so in Brazil. Like the Portuguese are much more reserved, again, for a Romance language. But compared to Brazilians, they're much more just kind of flat in their tonality and the way that they say things. Whereas Brazilians are just kind of, como vamos fazer aqui? Que WhatsApp zap? It's very... Yeah, the culture of it and the exchange of the energy, the way that Brazilians exchange energy is very attractive to me. I really like that vibe here.
Yeah.
And they don't have that in Portugal. It's very different.
Same to me. So we just committed coming back here to this place in October next year. And you were also just telling me before this interview that you will be back. Yeah, and I think many more people, many more digital nomads will make the way to Jerry and then find it out on their own. What makes this place so special? It's hard to define and it's hard to put it into words. But once you leave Jerry, I think you will get this feeling like, wow, this was something different. It was something very unique. And I didn't have very often, to be honest, the first time in my life that I'm really looking forward to a place just within a week, I left this place, like already looking forward to coming back to Jerry in October. And there's, as a digital nomad, where the world is really open and free for me, and I could go to every place, come back here again and again.
Yeah.
Cool. Samantha, thanks for your time and for all the insights and for everything you bring out in the world. And thanks for participating at the camp. And it was great fun meeting you. And I'm sure it's not the last time.
Yay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And hear you on the next episode. Peace and out.
Yes, yo, this was another episode of the Life Hacks Show. If you love what you're listening to and can use some of the tools and hacks we are sharing on the Life Hacks Show, I would be more than happy if you can give me a review or rating on iTunes. Follow me on facebook.com/Meurer Marcus and just ping me and give me some feedback that would mean the world to me. So long, have fun, peace and out.